Welcome back to the Crypto Clown World podcast. I'm your host with the honks, Jason Bruce. We are honking back in. It is the 13th of October. That spooky month is the year 2024. And I am rocking with my co-host as usual, Mr. Christopher Lundy. How's it going over there, sir?
Uh, like the last song on a Danzig record, it's 13, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm doing all right, Jason. I'm feeling as good as can be expected. And I know that you've been going through some important milestones yourself. So very grateful that you're benefiting from your own efforts and hopefully some of the information you've received from me as well as from others has been helpful to you. And really, my focus has been on improving outcomes, not just for myself, but for others as well. So perhaps we'll get somewhere with that in today's show.
Yeah, likewise, man, and much appreciated. It's always good to have you back.
Thank you.
Hope you're doing well, and
Hmm?
hope you have some interesting stuff for us today. I know you lined up some things I was looking at, and I was like, oh man, all right. So I'll let you jump in here. I don't want to preface the crypto market too much because we might have a little bit of a surprise brewing, but let's get to the news. Let's see what you got, and then I'll jump over the TA. We'll see what's going on.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Jason, for passing the baton as always. Before I begin with today's talking points, ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to make a correction to a previous report about not Hungary, but Hungary and Bulgaria specifically as it relates to the pager explosion investigation that's happening in both of those countries. Now, Hungary's access to the Black Sea is through the Danube River, which runs through Hungary and eventually terminates at the Black Sea coast. So I just wanted to add that correction before I get into today's talking points for today's episode. And kicking it off, our first story for the day, top story, is from balkaninsight.com. And the title of the article is Albania's census shows population fell by 14% since 2011. Albania's population fell from 2.8 million in 2011 to 2.4 million as of the time of the article, which would have been in June 28th, 2024. And this is according to the newly published results of the 2023 census, with figures showing a sharp rise in the percentage of elderly citizens. When I first saw this article, I was thinking, okay, this is a rather dramatic decline, or this might be the first country we're seeing it with a dramatic decline in its population. It's rather overt uh, post inoculation, right? But this is from 2011 to 2023, which I found to be very telling. When they just do it in 2020, so we could have another one in 2023. Well, Albania does not have the same types of resources per se, or does not utilize the same types of resources per se to chase people up in this manner as typically happens in the United States, as an example. But here's the leader. Figures published on Friday, and this would have been a Friday in June of 2024, so which Friday is not clear to me. I have a calendar in front of me at this exact moment. But figures published just to say in June, for the sake of the audience, from Albania's 2023 head count shows the total population has fallen by around 409,000 people, or some 14% since the 2011 census, when some 2.8 million people lived in the country. Now, according to the head of the Institute of Statistics, Instat, whose name is Elsa Dehuli, uh, stated stated in a press conference, quote, there are now 2.2,412,113 inhabitants who make up 755,950 families with an average size of 3.2 members per family and who live in 1,082,529 ordinary homes, close quote. Now, this census took place from September to November 2023 after being delayed several times because of the COVID-19 event and an earthquake in 2019, which is interesting because in the United States, they didn't delay the census at all. I remember because there were several people in my surround that were consistently being harassed by census takers. At one point, I was also harassed by census takers, and I told them where to go because I found it to be rather suspicious that they were wanting to get all these details right when the whole country was being turned into a prison camp. So I was like, yeah, this doesn't sound like a good idea or a good thing to be doing. But still, an important geopolitical lesson is that anytime the government comes calling for data at the exact time that people in the government committing crimes, that's precisely when you do not comply, ladies and gentlemen, ever. Because sometimes compliance can lead to things that aren't necessarily good for you, as it were. Continuing, and this is later in the article, Albania's government has been the target of criticism from their opposition over mass migration. And their prime minister, his name is Edi Rama, um, which the article describes as a quote, socialist, close quote. I would say this designation is rather painting with a broad brush, especially considering that there are many countries that he wishes to have nothing to do with that were essentially socialist countries, right? So that was something that I found to be bizarre in the article. But technically, if he is a member of a socialist party, technically he would be a socialist. But I would not necessarily take exception, but would examine that claim with a little bit more detail. That being the case, he dismissed it, saying it was a normal historical trend, which I found to be rather odd. When you're losing that much of your population, then that means that you've got a very serious drain on tax resources. That means you've got a drain on resources as it relates to infrastructure and also people in order to run that infrastructure. So this could be one of the reasons why Tirana has decided to move ahead with this Vatican-style center, of which 25% of its capital, Tirana, is about to be annexed for the Bektashi order. So perhaps Bektashism is meant to be a unifying factor in the rebuilding of and the enhancement of Albania's demographic core. Moving on to the next story, and this is just a brief infographic that I got from Solana Dex Volume. Many people have taken exception with my rather overt blasting of Solana over the course of its life, and these criticisms have ranged from an exorbitant amount of venture capital money to very high transaction failure rates in excess of 70%, to connections with sordid characters. And those arguments can be made for lots of projects. But whenever they get into the top 10 and their failure rates stay high, and their price continues to go up even then, that tells me someone really wants that to go up, and there's an agenda behind it. Well, that agenda doesn't appear to be trickling down to most of the users according to this graphic. So if we look at this, we've got several different volumes of overall volume. We've got all volume, 500K or more, and then all the way down to $10 or less. And according to this chart, from June 23rd of 2024 until approximately September 19th of this year, over 80% of active addresses that trade on Solana dexes have less than $10 of lifetime volume, which means almost all of the volume is being driven by the big hands. And this is a big clue, ladies and gentlemen. When you're dealing with a large cap and large percentages of its dexes aren't even trading anything or very little, that means that adoption is taking place, but in very small amounts. And it's hard for me to see how a project is able to maintain any type of economy of scale if 80% of its DEX traders have less than $10 in lifetime volume. That's not going to keep any type of decentralized exchange model flowing if it's using a fee-based model. And you have to make money somehow. And the how is an important question that I encourage Solana investors, important question I encourage Solana investors to ask, especially now. Moving on to the next talking point. This is from Delta One again, Mr. Walter Bloomberg on X. And I've been looking closely over the course of the last year and a half on the 2-year to 10-year Treasury yield curve. Well, it's turned negative again. It turned negative on September 18th, and now it's turned negative again. And the second time in less than a month. And that was the same day of the 50 basis points rate cut. That's when that 2-year to 10-year Treasury yield curve turned negative the first time. When it inverts and then disinverts and then inverts again, you're dealing with some serious volatility with the yield curves. And if we look at the Chinese bond market, where yield rates have crashed down, I think their bond yields for short termers got down all the way to 2.077%, as I recall. It's once at one point in the month of September 2024, which tells me that we could potentially see not just China, but more governments start to raid bonds in a desperate attempt to keep their economies from collapsing. And that's already what's happening in China, but they're also pulling out the stops to stimulate their economy more and try to inflate away the problems that they're experiencing right now. Well, I fail to understand personally how that is going to help anyone in China when they're dealing with a ghost cities problem of large metropolises with no one living inside of them. And whenever they have very expensive public works projects that have no functional money-making use case. These types of pet projects or pleasure principles as they were rarely lead to positive economic outcomes. But on the flip side, China is investing very heavily in AI and control mechanisms for AI, thinking that will be some way to bolster their power. But in reality, it's basically just shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic from my perspective. But the U.S. is no different, sadly, in terms of our debt to GDP ratios. Ours are higher than China's, but significantly higher. Theirs is in the 80% range. Ours is somewhere in the 120 to 130% range. So it might be a good time to diversify out of bonds because those yields are likely to continue decreasing.
Yeah, if I could interject just real quick, I'm not sure how many, rumors or rumblings you've heard of the Chinese liquidity cycle that's supposed to drive this crypto cycle, but it's basically time for them to print money. Um, it I'm not the guy to give you all the technicals and the specific stuff on this, but what it comes down to is they have specific liquidity cycles, very similar to how we do. They print money at certain times, and it's essentially coming down to a point where what you were saying, to boil it down to something really simplistic, is they're just trying to prop up their elite class at this point with the fake investments and the shady real estate deals and the state just essentially funneling all the money through the top earners and whoever is involved with the top part of their political structure. So the way they're set up is really not that different from how we're set up, right? Because the government and the corporations are so embedded with each other. It's how they sort of push everything out afterwards, and the communist aspect of it that's a little more harsh at this point than it is here, but they're trying to push us in that direction so hard right now. It's getting to the point where it's difficult to see the difference between us and them. The only difference is that at this point we've sent our entire manufacturing economy over to them, but they'll be in the process of, you know, handing that over to India within the next 10 to 20 years.
Yes, Jason, I think that's a fairly astute observation there, especially considering that India is expected to have the second highest GDP in the world within that same time span.
Yeah,
So,
China's already moving into consumerism. You can see it with their culture. It's already
yeah,
happening. So, uh,
yeah.
yep, it's only a matter of time. Back to you, bud.
Hey, thank you, Jason, and thanks for that a top off point. Appreciate it. All right, so moving on to our next story. This one comes from the Global Eye, republished from the Moscow Times website. And this is about Google, actually. Google is restricting account creation in Russia, according to the Russia's digital ministry. So, Google has restricted the creation of new accounts inside Russia, state media reported, citing Russia's digital communications ministry. Now, authorities have stated that telecom operators reported a quote significant decrease in the number of SMS messages sent by close quote Google to users in Russia, referring to messages the tech company uses to verify new account creation. And that's all I'm going to read for that particular article, ladies and gentlemen. But this will give me a few talking points to go over here. Number one is this is another sign of big tech's impending collapse. Is that people, whether they're in Russia or otherwise, uh, if they see your company as an adversary to their country, like the East India Company was an adversary to most of the Hindu Kush, they're not going to do business with you anymore, or they're going to find a way to undermine your business model. And since Google was recently ruled to be a monopoly, this is anything but good news for them. This is definitely um, getting caught with your hand in the cookie jar and not removing your hand in time, right? And what else does this say about technology? Well, it says that SMS based verification is a great way to de anonymize yourself to anyone you're doing business with or not doing business with. Because Google's doing business with your data and making money off of it and giving you nothing. And that's what their business model is. It has been the harvesting, collection, and sale of data. That's what it is. So, with a market as large as Russia's in terms of people, it's not an insignificant thing. But from a worldwide standpoint, Russia's less than 200 million people, whereas United States, if the current numbers are to be believed, is close to twice that. So, if not more than twice that amount. So, I anticipate that Russians are either by way of nudging or by way of their own due diligence deciding from a basic level to simply not use Google services. If another country such as the United States, or let's say Spain, or England, or Argentina, suddenly nobody decides to interact with Google services or respond to SMS requests to verify accounts, it would be front page news in those countries. But this was just kind of tucked into a little corner of the OSINT feeds. And anytime you see something this significant on an entire country's scale for a company as large as Google, it should raise some serious eyebrows, ladies and gentlemen. This is a trend. It's a trend in big tech's collapse. Don't invest in collapsing companies. Divest from them. This is a leading indicator that it's time to sell and walk away. And many financial commentators will make comments about doing the things that make you the most money, not necessarily the things that make the most sense from a moral standpoint. Well, where has moralless investing gotten us? Where has moral relativism in general gotten us as a society? It's got some people rich, sure. To what end? Well, you're seeing the ends right now. And I encourage the audience to think about what those ends have been and are and were over the course of the last 4 years plus. Moving on. And this is another infographic that I picked up off of K33 Research. And I may end up using K33 Research as a new primary source, ladies and gentlemen, because they've got some really good charting, significantly better charting than I've seen, especially from long term aggregates, if you're looking into that. So, one of the recent publications was the amount of time between global crypto market cap peaks. So, for the current, or from the previous global crypto market cap peak, happened at the time of writing 1,051 days prior to the time of writing. This was published about a week and a half to 2 weeks ago, so it's probably closer to 1,071 ish days, something like that, maybe 1,065. Now, the longest ever crypto market cap drawdown lasted for 1,106 days from December 15th, 2013 until December 25th of, well, it doesn't say which year in this particular article, so I presume that that would have been, if it's 1,106 days, it would have been more than 3 years. So past cycles drew down in their drawdown phase, lasted for approximately 1,096 days. If you're counting from January 7th, 2018 to January 7th, 2021. So it's a pretty clear indicator that we're at the very end of the uh, drawdown phase in between market cap peaks. And one thing that I noticed from this chart is whenever that second market cap peak is matched from the previous one, a big move to the upside followed it immediately afterwards, or very shortly afterwards. It wasn't necessarily a parabolic move up immediately, but the trend clearly started to escalate at that stage. So, from my perspective, now is the time to look for your favorite projects that haven't moved or that you know will or that you anticipate will and start placing those orders. Now is the time. Moving on to our next story, and comes from Zero Hedge. This is also Google, based upon our previous talking point. And Google stock has tumbled yet again after a judge has ruled that the tech giant must open their app store to competition. This was published 6 days ago on Monday, October 7th. And here's the leader. Federal judge in San Francisco just handed a big victory to Epic Games in its long-running antitrust challenge to the technology giant's app store. This technology giant, of course, being Google. Judge James Donato ordered Alphabet's Google to overhaul its mobile app business to give Android users more options to download apps and to pay for transactions within them, following a jury verdict last year for Fortnite maker Epic Games. Now, Fortnite is one of the, if not the most popular video game on planet Earth right now, ladies and gentlemen. And for those of you that are not familiar with Fortnite, just think back let's say you're in your mid 40s to early 50s. Think back to when you were between 5 to 10 years old playing Super Mario Brothers. That's what Fortnite is to the kiddos these days. It's the same type of, you know, uh, time and time sinking investment that you can get yourself into, if you want to call it an investment. It's an investment of time. But moving on, continuing. Alphabet must lift restrictions that prevent developers from setting up rival marketplaces that compete with its Google Play Store, upending the search giant's dominance in the lucrative Android app market. And that sent Google shares down 2% on the news. And they got sent down pretty hard and went and blew past all of their shorter term moving averages by looking at the low of the day. It blew straight through it by a large percentage. Now, Google had urged Donato to reject Epic's proposed reforms, saying they were costly, restrictive, could harm consumer privacy, etc., etc. And the judge dismissed those arguments down during an August hearing where the judge stated, and I quote, "You're going to end up paying something to make the world right after having been found to be a monopolist," close quote. And that's what he said to Google's lawyers. You're going to pay something to make the world right. It's essentially accusing Google of monopolizing the entire world's application infrastructure. So that tells me that the judge saw some interplay and perhaps some intrigue in relation to uh, cornerstoning apps. And when I say cornerstoning, it's not a technical term. It's basically a way of commandeering or cornering the market. And this is something that's a valid concern after the CrowdStrike incident that led to almost every airport on the globe having a blue screen of death, stranding travelers, right? So, more bad news for Google, more leading indicators for your future investments in this collapsing company. On to our next talking point, and I guess we're finally getting into geopolitics in today's episode, Jason. But back to the Levant, and this is this story took me some time to kind of go through to process here because it just shows us how many conflicting reports there are, right? And this is from the Cradle, another one of the primary sources I bring to the podcasts. And this is about the United States Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, who famously said that he was going to um, Israel in October of 2023, quote, as a Jew, close quote, which I found to be very telling. He was going there as a Jew, not as the United States Secretary of State, but as a Jew. Those were his exact words. So let's see what Tony Blinken has to say here. Since the start of Israel's ethnic cleansing campaign in Gaza, the U.S. backed army has become the leading cause of death for humanitarian workers worldwide. Well, when our Secretary of State approves Israeli attacks on Gaza aid convoys, that means that he is now directly complicit in these actions. After months upon months of denials of giving any orders to strike anything, this takes place. So here's the leader, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, or Anthony Blinken, depending on how it's spelled. It's spelled both ways in the media, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. And this is something I encourage you to look at very carefully. When you see people's names spelled multiple ways, look for the correct spelling. I've never understood that for the life of me, but continuing. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken gave the green light for Israel to launch attacks against humanitarian aid convoys inside the Gaza Strip, the early days of Israel's genocide of Palestinians, according to a report by Drop Site News, citing Israeli journalists and media outlets. And further down the article, citing a Channel 12 reporter, Yaron Avraham, the report states that these sessions saw Israeli officials, quote, deliberate for hours over the precise wording of the decision, with each draft being passed between the cabinet room and Blinken's room, a distance of a few meters away inside the Kiryat. Eventually, around 3 a.m., they arrive at an agreed upon text that is read in the cabinet room in English, close quote. Now, Channel 13 independently corroborated Avraham's reporting, detailing, quote, the discussion with Blinken is conducted as follows. He is sitting in a room in the Kiryat with his advisors and security team, while Security Cabinet holds the discussion. The Minister of Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, goes back and forth and interfaces with him, close quote. And continuing further down in the article, something else that caught my eye is over the past year, intentional Israeli attacks have become the leading cause of death for humanitarian workers across the world. And this was eye popping. The Israeli army is now responsible for more than 75% of aid workers' deaths recorded since October 2023. 75%. That's a very high figure, ladies and gentlemen. That is the large majority of all aid worker deaths throughout the world. And the United States has made its soft power diplomatic calling card foreign aid to countries in need in much earlier times. Sadly, it seems that we've come full circle and we are now actively engaged in preventing aid from reaching areas. But it's not at all unreasonable to come to this conclusion now that this has been published, now that FEMA has also been caught limiting aid to areas here in the United States affected by Hurricane Helene in North Carolina. Moving on to our next talking point, and this is also from Zero Hedge, but this one was on X. So the S&P has put Boeing, ladies and gentlemen, Boeing's the largest aircraft manufacturer in the United States, potentially the world up until this point, with major problems, of course. But Boeing is on credit watch negative after strike-related financial risk. Strike-related financial risk. Is it just strike-related financial risk? Or is it systemic risk as a result of being sanctioned by China or their DEI stuff that brought in woefully underqualified people to work in their factories, or the deliberate underpaying of people, or the deliberate non-inspection of goods and services while they're in the process of being manufactured? All kinds of problems, including malfeasance, the loss of their CEO, hemorrhaging executives. They've already announced 10% of their workforce disappearing. Now they're in credit watch negative. These are all signs of a company on its last legs. And these issues have been identified over and over within their supply chain, within their manufacturing processes, within their hiring processes. Every aspect of this company has been crippled in some way, which makes me wonder, if Boeing goes down, where is the United States going to get its military equipment? Is the United States going to have to nationalize the military industrial complex? Perhaps that's a talking point we should consider, especially considering that many critical infrastructures over the course of the last 20 years in the West have been. A notable one was whenever the water supply of Paris, France, was remunicipalized after it was successfully privatized under the tutelage of Jacques Chirac, who was the president of France at the time of that privatization. So this is what happens when you allow private companies to engage in enough criminal activity over enough time, not to mention the planes that they have that are falling out of the sky and no one goes to jail. It's not surprising that this company would start to see serious financial repercussions from those decisions, whether they were punished for them appropriately or not. The company does not look like it's going to be in good shape in the years to come. Moving on to our next story, and I really plastered Google all over the board here today, ladies and gentlemen, to emphasize it. There's another story that hit Bloomberg about Google this week. This is about the Google antitrust case. So the U.S. is now weighing a Google breakup in historic big tech antitrust case. So antitrust officials also mull making Google share its search data. Interesting. And who are they going to share that search data with? And why would antitrust officials even make them want to share that search data? Is it anonymized search data? Is it de-anonymized? None of their data is anonymized. It's all fully identifiable. So I see ulterior motives here, even amongst the antitrust officials. And Justice Department proposes multiple options in historic case. Here's the leader. There's not much more of it because, of course, it's a Google article, or not a Google, but a Bloomberg article. So Justice Department is considering asking a federal judge to force Google to sell off parts of its business. And that would be a historic breakup. Like this is very similar to what happened at AT&T in the early 1980s, ladies and gentlemen. They were forced to break up the company into smaller parts. But eventually, over the course of the next 20 to 25 years, they ended up buying all of those parts back. Right. So that may be another company breakup in disguise here. So Google may be, parted out, to put it lightly, and set aside someplace. But Google and Boeing, these are like top tier national security assets. And what is to be done with them? Well, in communist countries, everything is state owned. So perhaps this is a play of moving the state into position to take over these things. But it may not be that. It may simply be poor management of these companies. But it's hard to see them as anything other than analogs for the military industrial complex at this stage. So we're not really talking about legitimate economic drivers. We're talking about companies that are essentially involved in war crimes, human rights abuses, and violations of the Constitution. So Google isn't really being taken to task for its real issues here. It's just being ruled as a monopoly so that more people with controlling interests of other types can exert some type of influence on it, be they for good or ill. So we shall see how it plays out. Moving on to the financial industry, and we've got two more talking points, one from finance and one from geopolitics. So TD Bank is going to be paying $3 billion for allowing drug cartels to launder money. Well, who else allowed drug cartels to launder money for them? It's HSBC. Now TD Bank just got caught. So TD Bank pleaded guilty on Thursday to charges of money laundering and violations of the Bank Secrecy Act for failing to properly monitor money laundering by drug cartels and agreed to pay $3 billion to settle the case. And TD Bank is the 10th largest bank in the country. They had systematically failed to address, quote, systemic deficiencies, close quote, in their anti-money laundering policies over 9 years, and in certain cases knowingly took bribes to open accounts for drug traffickers. So they were essentially acting as agents for organized crime. And this is just for drug trafficking, ladies and gentlemen. Just for drug trafficking. What other types of trafficking are they doing? If they're paying $3 billion to drug cartels, well, paying $3 billion to allow drug cartels to launder money, how much money went through those cartels? And what were those cartels laundering? What were they doing businesses other than drugs? Well, the number one business of drug cartels at the border of the United States and Mexico is people smuggling, also known as human trafficking. All right. Continuing. More than 90% of transactions went unmonitored between January 2018 and to April 2024, which, quote, enabled three money laundering networks to collectively transfer more than $670 million through TD Bank accounts between 2019 and 2023, close quote, according to the Justice Department. And also, according to the Justice Department, individuals behind the scheme bribed employees with gift cards worth more than $57,000 to continue processing the transactions. And despite the individuals depositing well over $10,000 in cash, the limit at which a bank should report the deposits as suspicious, bank clerks did not identify the individuals in required reports. Now, this $10,000 limit was put into place by the Patriot Act in 2001, ladies and gentlemen. But interestingly, banks can report you even if you deposit less than $10,000 in cash using a legal snafu that they can get you with called, quote, structuring, close quote, where you, quote, structure, close quote, your deposits to go under that limit. And they can do that if you're depositing $1 or $9,999. They can claim you're, quote, structuring, close quote. So even if they are going through this process, it can still be abused to target people that aren't even doing anything wrong, simply exchanging funds. And $10,000 in cash isn't really going to get you much of anything anyway in that type of an operation. That you're usually moving much larger amounts and usually doing so covertly, but they need the legitimacy of a publicly facing commercial bank in order to hide their activities. Right. So I find it interesting that this is happening and they're just paying a fine and disappearing. But this is the exact same handling that HSBC got in the early 2010s when they got caught laundering for drug cartels. And it does not appear that anybody's going to be going to jail for it, of course, sadly. But this is the state of the, quote, justice system, close quote, in the United States, ladies and gentlemen. You pay a fine, you go home. I doubt that's going to last for too much longer. Moving on to our next story. 2 more talking points to wrap up. UN inquiry, and this is from CNN, of all sites. I rarely use CNN as a primary source for podcasts, ladies and gentlemen. But the fact that this even appeared on CEN's banner gave me pause. And here's the title of the article. UN inquiry accuses Israel of, quote, crime of extermination, close quote, through deliberate destruction of Gaza's healthcare system. This was published on October 11th, which was 2 days ago. And here's the leader. A United Nations inquiry has accused Israel of carrying out a, quote, concerted policy, close quote, of destroying the healthcare system in Gaza during its year-long conflict with Hamas and attacks it said amount to war crimes. Now, Israel's actions in the besieged Palestinian enclave, quote, constitute the war crimes of willful killing and mistreatment and the crime of against humanity of extermination, close quote, the commission said in a statement Thursday. Quote, Israeli security forces have deliberately killed, detained, and tortured medical personnel and targeted medical vehicles, close quote, in Gaza, according to the report by the UN's Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel. Further down the article, the UN report also accused Hamas and other Palestinian militant groups of committing war crimes of, quote, torture, inhuman or cruel treatment, rape, and sexual violence, close quote, for their treatment of Israeli hostages held captive in Gaza, and also investigated, quote, institutionalized mistreatment, close quote, of Palestinian detainees in Israeli prisons. Now, this many of these talking points about what was and was not done by who have circulated around in the media since October the 7th, 2023, which was when the initial Hamas attacks came. But one thing that the media does not discuss in these was that there were large numbers of Haredim that were entering into Al-Aqsa Mosque, performing Jewish rituals inside of it as a provocative move to provoke some type of a response. And there were many protests as well as live rounds shot against Palestinian residents of East Jerusalem who attempted to go there many times over the last 4 to 5 years, simply to pray. So the when looking at this and when looking at the longer term aspects of what's happened in this particular country, I think that it's clear that the amount of time that has passed is going to eventually take the gloves off of just about any type of potential reprisals. But at the same time, many of these reports from both sides have been proven both false and true, because as we know, truth is the first casualty of war. And one more thing I'll speak to in this particular article is towards the end, and it's about the report and what it determined. So the report, quote, determined on reasonable grounds that the Israeli Army's 102nd Division, close quote, which operated in the area at the time, is, quote, responsible for killing the family of 7, shelling the ambulance, and killing 2 paramedics inside, close quote. So in any conflict, anywhere, bombing hospitals, bombing ambulances, attacking civil defense workers, all these things are war crimes. All of them are. So what how this will play out, what the punishment will be is hard to say because UN's given Israel a 12-month deadline to evacuate the occupied Palestinian territories. Some have interpreted this as they simply need to withdraw from Israel entirely and give the entirety of the country back to the Palestinian people, or to simply agree to the 1967 borders. One could be true, the other could be true, neither could be true. It's hard to say. But one way or another, the status quo is likely to change in that section of the Levant within the next 5 to 10 years, if not much sooner. And now, moving on to our very last talking point of the day, which is from the Wall Street Journal of all sources. And here's the title of the article: Iran's secret warning to U.S. allies: don't help Israel or you're next. And here are some talking points from this article that I'll top off today's show with. Tehran is threatening in secret diplomatic back channels to target the oil-rich Arab states and other American allies in the Middle East if their territories or airspace are used for an attack on Iran, said Arab officials. And this dovetails very nicely into my last talking point from last week's show, ladies and gentlemen, where I showed that Saudi Arabia was declaring neutrality in the Iran-Israel conflict, as well as any conflicts with Yemen. Just a few months prior to that, they were threatening to invade Yemen with a coalition led by the UAE, Bahrain, and the United States. Suddenly, they no longer have the appetite for that. Saudi Arabia is the richest country in the Middle East, far richer than Israel is, right? So, and it's interesting because Mohammed bin Salman was asked if he cared about what was going on with the Palestinian struggle. He said he personally didn't, but his people did, which I found to be very telling. If he doesn't, but his people does, or people do, why didn't he do something far sooner? Very telling. Continuing, Israel has threatened Tehran with a severe reprisal after Iran fired about 180 ballistic missiles at Israel earlier in the month of October, which would have been the first day of this month, with some Israeli officials and commentators pushing for damaging strikes on Tehran's nuclear facilities or oil infrastructure. So this first point alone would immediately crash the global economy. An attack on Iran's oil infrastructure would easily send oil prices well beyond $200 per barrel. Say hello to $20 a gallon gas. If that happens, ladies and gentlemen, you're not going anywhere. And say hello to much higher prices at the grocery store. Continuing, in that event, Iran has warned it would respond with devastating hits on Israel's civilian infrastructure and would retaliate against any Arab state that facilitated the attack, the officials said. The Arab officials said the countries that Iran has threatened include Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, all of which host U.S. troops. These states have told the Biden administration that they don't want their military infrastructure or airspace to be used by the United States or Israel for any offensive operations against Iran, the officials said. So this wasn't just a polite conversation that Masoud Pezeshkian was having with Mr. Farhan, the former minister of Saudi Arabia. It was basically a warning to him to not cross the line with the United States. The balance of power is changing in the region, and to know which way the wind is blowing. So Iran is speaking with significantly more hard and soft power, and with Russia and China behind them. If anything happens to those oil or nuclear infrastructures, both Iran and China and Russia will be forced to react. And that's when the situation is going to become very dangerous. So I predict that someone is either going to find a way to calm things down, or this is all going according to someone's sordid plan. Either way, as they say about plans, best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. And with that, Jason, that is the end of my talking points for today's episode. Back to you for TA and all of that goodness, sir. See what you got.
Thank you, my friend. Eye opening as always. And that last one, that's kind of like the linchpin, right? You know,
Right. Mm-hmm.
how long have the rumors and rumblings of this been going on? I mean, it's decades, really. with the greater Israel plan, that's the ultimate end game, right?
Yeah.
So uh, if you really look at it objectively, it's not just saber rattling. The Iranians are pretty close to being backed into a corner at this point, at the behest of, the Western allies in the region, and you can see that the Israelis are starting to make a push for the final domino to fall here. So, matter of time, I would say, with all of this. Whether it's what would cause a recession or a bear market in, potentially 26, 27, or if it's going to take a few more years to like really foment and boil over, and we won't see this thing really kick off until the end of the decade. Um, we've got about 4 or 5 years max before this happens, so I would say plan accordingly. Anything else you might want to add, sir?
Well, one thing I wanted to mention in regards to investing in this type of environment, precious metals. Anytime you see critical infrastructure being targeted by people that have a plan or don't, especially in regions that supply considerable percentages of the world's energy, in which there are many big players that protect that, that's going to have explosive effects on precious metals prices. So don't forget about precious metals in the crypto runs, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep,
Don't do it.
absolutely. Don't be afraid to divert some of your profits over there as you take them over the next few months, because you'll see more resiliency in the metals market if we see any type of a pullback with the larger markets. So you'll feel a lot better about your gold or silver going down 10 or 20% than you will your crypto going down 50 or 75% or more. So, again, plan accordingly, folks. Thanks as always, Chris. Going to jump into
You're
some
welcome.
TA here and make sure you enjoy the rest of your night, man. All right, so let's jump over to the S&P, which has opened on the CME futures. You can see the daily open here. People were calling for the big dumpski here. We did not get a break of the 21 MA on the daily, and we're currently holding pretty bullish structure as a result. Clean this up just a little bit for folks here. So we had a little flag here, had a little breakout, a little consolidation, retest of those levels. And now realistically what we've got is probably something that's a little bit more like this. Where we had this type of a flag and that's breaking out now. So you can see that it hit this first level that I had mapped out at about, was that 158.50 area, somewhere in there. So probably bump up a little above the level that I had mapped out recently. You're going to bump up pretty close to that 6,000. That 6,000 is probably going to be a psychological resistance. You might see some consolidation from there. But the larger move, the breakout of this pattern here, is going to be somewhere around 6,200, maybe even a little higher. So keep an eye out for that. The daily is consolidating bullishly here after breaking out of this flag. You cut this up another way here if you wanted to. Yep, and it's going to take you right up to around that area. So somewhere in that area, somewhere in here, 6,200 to 6,250, something like that for the S&P. If you see the price action get up there, I would be taking some profit aggressively and looking for consolidation. Bitcoin. So we just opened on CME and it Looks like it wants to correct a little bit on the hourly right now. Markets were getting a little pump as we opened the show, but BTC is kind of moving sideways. It sort of front ran everything else breaking out, and then it's kind of odd. Like right as we were starting the show, everything was starting to move. So we start to look around at what Bitcoin's doing here. Let's get a little more zeroed in. Like on what this hourly's doing. This hourly's trying to roll over right now. So I was hoping to see this flag hold up. Realistically, you got two scenarios here, right? You can hold the 200 MA on this hourly and this point of control, which that level's right around 62.2 to about 62.3, right in that area. If you lose that level, you're going to be coming back down to test this 60K area. So the real issue right now is the denial at the 200 MA on the, the 200 daily on this 1 hour chart. So keep in mind the 200 daily might look different on this chart as opposed to CME. CME, you can see we're actually bouncing off of the 200 daily here, this green line. Which is, ascending with the price action here, wick below just slightly and now bouncing off. And also above this 200 MA, not to be confused with the 200 daily, this purple line, all right, on the 4 hour. So it won't always look the same when you're comparing CME to other spot indices. But what you've got right now in terms of your hourly is a decision point. So you got a little bit of a falling broadening wedge that's forming there, where you can see very, very simply the resistance line is the 200 daily. It just is what it is. So to show you kind of how that MA works, if we were to flip over to the daily chart, let me remove these fibs so this is a little easier to see. If we were to move over to the daily chart, that purple line is gone now because it's actually being covered by this green line. The green line and the purple line are the same thing now because the 200 MA is the same as the 200 daily when you're on the daily chart. Otherwise, they'll diverge. So if you come back to the 4 hour, you can see this is your 200 daily and this purple line here is your 200 MA on the 4 hour. So those are different on any other time frame other than the daily, at which point the 200 MA and the 200 daily are the exact same thing. All right, hope that wasn't too confusing. It's just a quick crash course on moving averages. Something to keep in mind as far as those moving averages go right now on the 4 hour for BTC. You're getting a nice bounce right off the 21 MA, and you're holding price action above the purple 200 MA. All right, so above the 21 MA, the yellow line, you're always bullish. Above the 200 MA, the purple line, you're always bullish. If you're below those, you're going to start to see more bearish price action. When you're sandwiched in between those types of MAs like we're seeing right here, you'll see consolidation like we're seeing here. So as long as we don't see loss of point of control, loss of 21 MA, and loss of the 200 MA on the 4 hour, which is about 61,950, we should not see any further downside. If we start to close a 4 hour candle below 61,950, I would look for the further retrace of this pattern going into Monday and Tuesday. All right, and you can see liquidity here going down to this golden pocket area, but there is another area down here at about 59.6 to 59.7, which coincides with this tweezer bottom here. I would really, really look for this level. If you want to be a jerk about it, this is probably the exact entry that would make all your friends cope and seethe that you got the last entry before 60K on Bitcoin before we rocket off to new highs. So that would be my line in the sand here. If you start closing 4-hour candles below that, you're in trouble. And we could see much further retracement, which I don't see coming in this market right now. We should be in a consolidated phase before moving much, much higher. Okay, much, much higher. So I had this little flag here earlier, and just to show you this stuff works. Keep in mind I was looking for the upside target, but if you measure this out from the breakdown, where does that go? Almost exactly. Almost exactly. You know, and if you were to measure it from the retest, probably even closer there. So very, very close to where the breakdown was at. All right, and this may break down further. You know, again, like we just talked about with the fib retracement, we could still see these lower levels. You have this liquidity here, 59.6, about 60.3. So you could see wicks down to that area. But with this consolidation, I would say as long as you're holding these levels, especially above this 382, where you can see there's a little bit of a volume node sticking out here, I would say if that holds, we're going to stay very bullish. So that's about that 61.8 to 61.9 level that I just highlighted as well. So that should break it down pretty effectively for Bitcoin in terms of the next 24 to 48 hours, let's say. Now, if we were to move over to a little more of a zoomed out view, this is the 1 week on Bitstamp. What I don't like here is that we're kind of printing a lower low on this weekly candle. I do like the long wick. Your oscillators are kind of middling. Technically bullish, however, as both are above the 50 level. So really this seems consolidative. As long as these levels hold, we should be able to continue to move up. So the weekly not really giving us like too much here right now, because again, these oscillators are kind of middling, but once again technically bullish. If they were to dip below this line, this 50 level, for either of them, that would be very, very concerning. So I'll keep an eye on that. You can see here when that's happened previously, the last few times we've seen large dumps in the market, but it was able to consolidate just below those levels and move back up. The stochastics reset, but the RSI didn't. The RSI hasn't reset on the weekly actually since June of 22, when we dumped to the 20K level and just below to about 17. So realistically, I don't expect this RSI to reset again anytime soon, any deeper than it has. So we're holding this level right here. Okay? We're holding this level. And I want to note as well, and it is very slight, but there is a hidden bullish divergence there with the level that we're holding on the RSI, where this swing down here in price action is much lower than this one. However, you're slightly higher on this RSI here, slightly lower over here with this higher high in price action. This is very minute. You have to have a very good eye and understand how these divergences form in order to even see this. But with this holding, the market will stay bullish. Okay? The market will stay bullish. So real quick, let's take a look at dominance. We're getting denied at this box that I had outlined, that I've had outlined for the longest time. Looks like dominance is going to have to take a chill pill for at least a minute. This is on the 5-day chart. Let's zoom in just a little bit here. The daily is getting a bit of a curve. That's interesting. So you're getting a curve on the stochastics, RSI is above 50, and you're bouncing off the 21 MA on the daily for dominance. So that could move up just a little bit more. It could move back up into this box. We talked about 59, 60%, even 61% being possible. I would say if Bitcoin's going to make this last move, that's probably likely. But any drop down to this area and retest this larger structure before this larger move happens is totally fine too. So just interestingly enough, if we look at the oscillators, this is all still just staying in this range. So all technically consolidative, but also technically bullish with the RSI above that 50 level. And stochastics are trying to confirm that as well on the daily for dominance. So something to keep an eye on as usual. Dominance isn't always the best indicator of price action itself, but it certainly tells you that the market is going to be moving in some fashion if dominance is moving. So with that said, we'll flip over to tether dominance on the 4-hour. And it's really, really interesting how this thing's been moving lately, because it looks like it's going to make a big move and then it just dies. And what it did within about the last 12 hours here is get a really, really important rejection. And we just talked about how Bitcoin was holding the 200 MA and the 21 MA on the 4-hour in its price action. And now you can see here that we're being rejected at the 200 MA and the 21 MA and the point of control on the 4-hour for tether dominance. So this, combined with Bitcoin, is the best thing that you can do to kind of determine what that movement is going to be in the real short term, at least in my opinion. So what is slightly concerning is this looks to be like higher lows, potentially consolidative. All right. Could be seeing something like that coming in. I'm going to eliminate that larger head and shoulders that I had drawn there, but you could be seeing something like that. Okay. It's a little bit sloppy, just a thought. I would like to see this invalidated and further breakdown. What we really need to see for the big move to happen for this market is for USDT dominance to lose this white line, 200 weekly, and this green line, 200 daily. At which point you could see a pretty deep move, at least this 1.618 fib or around this yellow line, but potentially even deeper to around the 2.618 retrace, and where this measured move is at, which was actually I can get it back here. Yep, it was actually part of this larger pattern that I had drawn here, which I've had drawn for a while. I like this double topping action here because that may help that play out. Okay, totally fine with that. However this has to play out, I just want to see something like this, where this flag breaks down as opposed to breaking up, because somehow if this flag breaks up, it's going to be a massive dump in the crypto markets. And I'm going to tell people right now, stay on your toes, because keep everything that Chris said in the back of your pocket, because the geopolitical environment is so volatile right now that if we do see all out full scale world war, The market is going to move violently in one direction or another. So either the market's going to sell off these high risk assets, or people are going to be like, oh crap, this is it. This is my last chance to get the Bitcoin. Or, what if I have to get out of this country and I need, an asset that I can carry with me? I can move everything over to Bitcoin right now. Or, you know, you're going to start seeing that, folks. You're going to start seeing that. So it's going to be the push and pull of whether people want to be out of these risk on assets, or whether the fundamentals and the low supply, the low fixed supply takes over in these times of crises, and people realize what Bitcoin could actually do for them in a potential wartime situation. So praying that doesn't happen, folks, and that we can just have some fun price action to play around with, and hopefully move into this bull market here over the next 6 to 8 months, into next year, maybe even the end of next year. This thing's moving potentially a little bit slower than it has before. I think a lot of people were calling for parabolic move at the end of this year, and then that was it. I think what we're going to see is more of a slower melt up the end of this year. And anybody who takes profit and thinks that this market is going to dump off early into next year, they may miss the boat, or they may miss their re-entry, because I think it's just going to pump really, really hard. Late this year into early next year. And we'll start to see BTC and ETH break out, and then the altcoins will start to go crazy as we move into spring. And that market will mature after a couple months, and people will take big time profits going into the summer, as usual. So be ready for that. That's what I'm looking for a little longer term. All right, let's move over to the altcoins. This is looking great. All right, 1 hour getting a bounce off the 200 MA. Price action has just moved above the yellow line, 21 MA. So what does that tell you? Bullish on the 1 hour. You're above point of control. We had this little head and shoulders here that got everything started. This right here. All right, real simple. So now we're getting a retest of these moving averages, and the next hurdle for total 3 is going to be this 200 daily moving average, which is up around 622 billion. Above that, your next level is 642 billion, 678 billion, according to this measured move. We're right on track for this to play out. Right on track, folks. Nothing to worry about there. Let's real quick take a look at our daily close, and we'll move on. This is exactly what you want to see. All right. Bullish consolidation above the 50 level on the RSI. The stochastics are pointing up. This is bullish confirmation on the daily. To really flip bullish, obviously we want to flip above the 50 level for the stochastics as well. But this is confirmation of a bullish move when we flip back above the 20 level. You can see this every time when we get confirmation above that there's some type of a move here. Went above it, moved up here, even though we came back down. Held it here, big move up, came back down, broke out of it, big move up, came back down, broke out of it, big move up. This isn't rocket science, folks. It's really not. Okay? Pay attention to your oscillators. They will save your ass in this market. Let's take a look at Ethereum. It's the ETH BTC pair. All right. Let's flip out to the 4 hour. What do we see here? Holding a point of control. Double bottoming. Price action trying to close above the 21 MA and above the point of control. Bullish signs. 200 MA just above. All right. Not a big move up there. If you move up there, you're likely to gap up. If you gap up, you have a chance to turn this into support now. Above this 200 MA on the 4 hour, things will get much more bullish. So let's move over to the daily. You can see here that we're about to close with a couple green candles in a row. We're seeing some consolidation just below the bullish levels on the oscillators. And most importantly, to me, for this picture right now, is that we are holding higher highs after creating this divergence. So you came down, created the low, created the divergence, and now you're creating a higher high in price action and on the RSI and on the stochastics with the confirmed breakout above the 20 level on the daily. You just need confirmation to flip bullish above the 50 level on both the RSI and the stochastics RSI. So this actually looks pretty good for ETH BTC pair. And again, I did make note of it, but right at the start of the show, we started to get this move here. So hopefully this is part of the larger move initiating. As you can see, this started here on the hourly. So cross your fingers, folks, that this is the final countdown. All right. It's an odd looking flag that you're kind of seeing there, but you know, how much longer can this market continue to stomp on ETH? I don't think it's going to be too much longer, because if you take a look here, this is a really, really strong bullish divergence on the 3-day. All right. You're swinging down lower in this price action over here where you made this low on this tweezer bottom, but this is much higher on the RSI. And when you come over here to this low on the RSI, this is much higher in price action. So this is a very strong divergence on a 3-day chart, 3-day time frame, which is a larger time frame. This denotes a larger move coming in for altcoins, folks. Get your bags ready. Get your bags ready this weekend if you've got spare cash. Get it ready, folks. If you're not in the market, get ready. If you've been averaging in, continue to average in at these levels. You will not be sorry. If you're sitting on your hands, my God, what are you doing? You know, not financial advice as always, folks, but holy cow. Get yourself a financial advisor, I guess, if you're not sure what you're doing, or if you don't, want to kind of take some leap of faith on what I'm telling you here, which, it's the same leap of faith that I take. I don't put anything out here that I don't have conviction on. Okay, so 15-minute time frame for Ethereum versus the US dollar. This is bullish. You're above the purple line, above the yellow line, and now bouncing off the green line, which is, I believe, your 100 MA, the way I've got this set. Yeah. So on the 15-minute, Bitcoin is closing above all key moving averages and above this local point of control. Or excuse me, Ethereum. I'm sorry. We are on Ethereum. So as we move out to this hourly, we're seeing a chance for a further bounce here. You can see we broke out, retested. And this is going to flip into a green candle now. You're holding above 21 MA. You're holding above the purple line, the 200. Let's flip out to the 4-hour here. 4-hour, you're bumping into some resistances. This 100 and 200 acted as resistance. You're consolidating above the 21. It's key consolidation. All right. There is actually a hidden bullish divergence here. This would be very hard probably for a lot of folks to see, but slight difference in price action here, a little bit lower. This closed a little higher with the bounce off the 21 MA. This swing in the RSI higher. This swing on the RSI lower. The bounce off the 50 level, denoting bullishness. Those are things you look for confirmation, folks. It honestly doesn't get any easier. And then when you take a look at this, you're getting a key bounce off this white line, which is my 200 weekly. All right. And if this is a W pattern breakout, it's going to take Ethereum back up to the resistance at the top of this last move. All right. So around 2,700, 2,750, somewhere in that area. Okay. 27.21 is the actual measured move for this W pattern. And you say W pattern, what are you talking about, Jason Bruce? Well, it's just literally this. Okay, it's just literally a W. All right, and those apply to the downside as well. When you start to see an M pattern with that slumping right shoulder, you can usually refer to that as some sort of a double top, and check your divergences obviously at that point. Okay, so we're going to jump over to the third largest cryptocurrency by market cap, BNB. We are seeing this consolidation on the 4-hour. I'm still in my long trade on BNB. Break out of this point of control. We'll push price above $600 to around 627 bucks. Okay, bear with me for a moment while I take a drink here. All right, moving on real quick. XRPZ, seeing consolidation here and what appears to be an ascending triangle. A little bit of a breakdown here, but now back inside the pattern and testing the bottom side of the 21 MA and the point of control. All right, break out of this pattern would be pretty spiffy. Up into this area between about 57.5 to 58.5 cents. So probably right around 58 cents. If we see the breakout there for XRP. Oh, and take a look at this. What is this? This is a bullish divergence here. All right. And I'm trying to really drill down on these divergences here and really hit this home for people. So I want you to understand how these work. All right. So you can see here, swing low on the RSI, lower than this. All right. So you have higher high on the RSI, but you have a lower high in price action with a tweezer bottom. Okay. When you see these tweezer bottoms and a bullish divergence on a time frame like the 1 hour, these are key positions to be able to take along. All right. So if I had a little more time earlier today, I probably would have seen that and taken that long position. For right now, this is like a no entry zone for me for trading, because you've got the stochastics that are starting to peak and your RSI is coming up to this 50 level. You could see some consolidation or a little bit of a move down first before this breaks out. Something like this. Okay. So we'll keep an eye on that. And, you know, XRP, man, such a tease. But this weekly looks like it wants to break down. These stochastics look horrible. The RSI is just below the 50 level. And what I don't like is this candle that we're starting to print here. I know it's a little hard to see that head and shoulders, but I want to leave that in place, because I do think that's a potential for a reversal. So either you see this reversal here, or you're going to see a much larger breakdown for XRP. And it would probably be like the whole length of this candle type of thing, if that broke down. That would like kill XRP holders. That would murder them. But it would come back down, test these lows, and you potentially see a double bottom out of there. So are we going to see a big crash before we pump? Like, what if we saw a crash in October before a bull market? That would be like such an anomaly, and the big dogs would really be able to take advantage of that, because I know people are looking for a bullish October. It's just what's happened every time. Before we initiated a bull run, we've had a bullish October. All right. So, quant. Yes, I'm talking about quant. All right. I am seeing quant consolidating in an ugly head and shoulders, and I'm looking for a breakout above the 200 daily. I know people aren't talking about quant. It's probably not popular to talk about quant right now. Quant didn't perform very well over the last 2 years, really, that I've been looking at it. Now, I was able to trade quant and make some good money on it in 22. I took quant from averaging in the $40 to $50 level, and I sold it off at this level. I had this mapped out right here. I sold it off right there, folks. Believe me, I took that move. Okay? Since then, I've built a much larger bag of quant, and I believe that quant is going to make a larger move. All right? I believe it has the ability to do that. So there is hidden bullish divergence on the 5-day. And I would like to see some confirmation of some type of a breakout in that manner. You know, you've got a larger triangle here that you need to get above and a point of control. Any closures above, like $102 on like a 5-day basis, I would look for a larger move for quant. I'm not ashamed to say that I've been buying a few quants over the last few weeks. I'm still anticipating a larger move for this thing, and I honestly think that it could move to $500 or higher in the bull run. Okay. In terms of the supply and the fundamentals on this project, I think it could easily be a 4-figure coin. Maybe not this run, but by the end of the decade. So I'm looking a little longer term with quant and XRP as well, and anything ISO related is going to be a 5-year hold for me. If I see pumps, I may take some profits, but there's going to be a 5-year hold with these ISO projects from here. Okay? So I'm talking into 29 and 2030. All right? Real quick, flip over to Caspa. That was the one request that I had in the Discord today, and we usually cover Caspa. So let's see what's going on there. This looks to be consolidative and in a buy zone, to be honest. So 5-day chart. This is actually like hidden bullish divergent, and your stochastics are trying to curve back up. So what I like is the higher low that's being printed here. Okay. But this is definitely hidden bullish divergent. You can see you're higher on the RSI here, but lower in price action. This is not the prettiest pattern, I will say. This gives like triple top or head and shoulder vibes. And if that's the case, you're going to see a nasty retracement for Caspa to these levels here between 9 and potentially even 5 cents. If this holds, Caspa's going to make a big move up. And your next levels to watch for, if you create a new high, you'll be looking 20 to 25 cents and 33 cents. Above that, you're going to be looking much, much higher, 53 cents, 71 cents, $1.14. Yes, I have those levels mapped out. Yes, I have higher levels mapped out as well for Caspa. All right. But again, don't be surprised if we see more dumpage first. You could see some support around the 10 to 11 cents area as well. All right. Let's take a quick look at the daily and the 4-hour. So I just want to see if we're seeing signs of not making that larger move down like I was seeing. So I'm not seeing any bullish divergence on the daily. There is some hidden bullish though. Like this swing down here. That's hidden bullish. You're much lower in price action here, but higher on the RSI, and then higher in price action here, but lower on the RSI. And this looks to have reset, but I'm not seeing the bullish divergence confirmation like over in this recent price action on the daily. So let's get a little more granular. We'll look at the 4-hour, and you can actually see it here. So that's why you want to use your different time frames, folks. You can see lower on the RSI here, higher in price action, lower on the RSI, swung down, double bottom. Or excuse me, lower on the price action, swung down, double bottom, but higher on the RSI, confirming this bullish divergence. And now you're confirming a higher low. Okay, so you want to get above this yellow line, 21 MA on the 4-hour. That's the most immediate resistance. 200 MA on the 4-hour, 15.8 cents, and the local POC, 16.5 cents. Those are going to be the short-term resistances for CASPA. If you are interested in CASPA or holding CASPA and looking to average in, or it's a coin you're looking to pick up for the bull run, might not be a bad spot to grab some right now, because we may be seeing something like this, where this will get you started. This is your reversal pattern. Okay, so that's what I'm seeing for CASPA. Two more coins I'm going to cover. Aerodrome Finance looks freaking incredible right now. Okay, I'm holding a large bag of Aero. Very happy about the profits that I have unrealized in that bag right now. I've been averaging in for a long period of time, and the measured move on this right now is taking us up to this area that I had highlighted real close to around $3.30. So Aerodrome Finance, folks, this is the liquidity hub for the base network on Coinbase. All right, beautiful ascending triangle, quite likely to make a larger move. And you can see here as well, there's your Atom, there's your Eve, and there it goes. So you've had breakout of the Atom, retest of the Eve, and now breakout of this flag. And any pullback here to the 21 MA, if you're not in Aerodrome Finance, feel free to jump in, folks. This looks fantastic. All right. Just want to jump over to the daily real quick. Yeah. This is exactly what we wanted to see. All right. So larger measured move for Aero. $17 to $18. All right, so you could still 15x from here on Aero. This looks amazing. Okay, RSI is just moving above this overbought territory, but a lot of the time this is a sell signal, right? But not when your stochastics are just confirming. So now you want to wait for your stochastics to top out and then look for a bearish divergence. And you take some profit out of Aero. Looks fantastic. All right. So I posted a very low cap gem to the Discord a few days back. This is on Solana. Okay. This is S Doge, meaning Solana Doge. Okay. I am familiar with the dev on this project. All right, this was posted to a private group that I am in. And stuff that he has posted prior, folks, has gone ballistic. I am in profit on this. I was not smart enough to trade out, and essentially I could have doubled my bag there. I'm going to have to start paying a lot more of attention here, and it's time to buckle down, and recreation time's over. Summertime's over. We're getting into fall, and it's time to buckle down on this market. So I should have been swinging this thing. I didn't, but regardless, I put a number of soul into this project because I do believe it's going to fly. Folks, this is a great entry right now. I'm going to show you why. We swung down lower in the price action here at the bottom of this flag, but we are bullishly divergent on the RSI here. This is the 1 hour time frame. This asset is very new. People will say you can't do technical analysis on these new coins. I say poppycock. So this is your entry, folks, right around 1,000. I forget what the name of the increments is on Solana. I'm really trying not to be that big of a freaking nerd, folks. But this right here is exactly what I look for in life. And the higher targets on this coin from this area would yield you about a 25 to 26x. So high risk, high reward. Again, I am familiar with who's running this project. They have had very successful projects in the bull run in the past. Actually heard about Uniswap from them before it went big when it airdropped. So this thing here has big potential. Don't risk any more than you're willing to lose, obviously, folks, but you're down 36% in the last 24 hours. Again, bullishly divergent on the 1 hour in this flag. Don't sleep, folks. Don't sleep. Again, not financial advice. As always, I'm going to cap it off there. I'm going to jump real quick back to BTC. Let's just see that short-term price action. We're still consolidating, and I believe this is actually a breakout that's going to be occurring here. Something like that. Okay. So again, 200 daily moving average, this 63.4 area, that's the big one to look for Bitcoin, folks, as we move in through the next 24 to 48 hours. I would expect the bears to be cooked at this point. If October is going to happen, it's going to happen soon, and we're going to move back into those mid 60s. You know, the bears have to make their move now. If they're not making that move, the bears are going to cook, or the bears are going to be cooked, and the bulls are going to take over. So we're at that pivot point. I think we're at a crucial area in the market here. Either a big move up or down is coming, and my probabilities say that the bull run is on, and we will see higher prices through the next few months and into next year. So that's all I've got for you, folks. On the way out, if you haven't, I didn't ask you at the top of the show or at the break, which is my fault. If you've made it this far, I freaking love you. Please smash the like button, honk the hell out of it on the way out if you didn't on the way in. And if you're not subscribed to my channel for any reason, make sure you do that. Hit the bell for notifications. That way you'll know when these podcasts are put out in the future. And we will be doing video updates soon. I can promise you that, along with the podcast. So I am Jason Bruce. This has been Crypto Clown World. Have yourselves a fantastic evening, an even better week, folks, and we'll catch up with you next weekend. God bless.